Hello, my puppets. Today, I'm going to read you the story of Tom Thumb from the Brothers Grimm. There was once a poor countryman who used to sit in the chimney corner all evening and poke the fire while his wife sat at her spinning wheel. And he used to say, "How dull it is without any children about our house. Our house is so quiet, and other people's houses so noisy and merry." "Yes," his wife answered and sighed. "If only we could have one, and that one ever so little, no bigger than my thumb, how happy I should be. It would indeed be having our heart's desire." Now it happened that after a while the woman had a child who was perfect in all of his limbs, but no bigger than a thumb. And when his parents said, "He is just what we wish for, and we love him very much," and they named him according to his stature, Tom Thumb. And though they gave him plenty of nourishment, he grew no bigger, but remained exactly the size as he was when he was first born. And he had very good faculties, and was very quick and prudent, so that all he did prospered. One day, his father made ready to go into the forest to cut wood, and he said to himself, "Now I wish there were someone who could bring the cart to me." "Oh, father," cried Tom Thumb, "if I can bring the cart, let me alone for that, and in proper time, too." Then the father laughed and said, "How will you manage that? You are much too little to hold the reins." "That has nothing to do with it, father. While mother goes on with her spinning, I will sit in the horse's ear and tell him where to go." "Well," answered the fathers, "we will try it for once." When it was time to set off, the mother went on spinning after and set Tom Thumb in the horse's ear. So he drove off, crying, "Gee up!" and "Gee whoa!" So the horse went on, quite as if his master were driving him, and drew the wagon along right the road to the wood. Now it just so happened that they turned a corner, and the little fellow was calling, "Gee up!" so that two strange men passed by. One said, "Look, how is this? Where the wagon goes, and its driver is calling to the horse, yet he's nowhere to be seen." "It is very strange," said the other. "We will follow the wagon and see where it belongs." And then the wagon went right through the forest and up to the place where the wood had been hewn. And when Tom Thumb caught sight of his father, he cried out, "Look, father, here I am with the wagon. Now take me down." The father held the horse with his left hand, and with the right he lifted down the little son of the horse's ear. And Tom Thumb sat down on a stump, quite happy and content. When the other two strangers saw him, they were struck dumb with wonder. At last one of them said, taking the other aside, "Look here, that little chap would make our fortune if we were to show him in the town for money. Suppose we buy him." So they went up to the woodcutter and said, "Sell the little man to us. We will take care and he shall come to no harm." "No," answered the father, "he's the apple of my eye, and not for all the money in the world would I sell him." But Tom Thumb, when he heard what was going on, climbed up his father's coat-tails, and perching himself on the shoulder, he whispered in his ear, "Father, you might well let me go. I will soon come back." And the father gave him up to the two men for a large piece of money, and they asked him where he would like to sit. "Oh, put me on the brim of your hat, as I lose the page, because why not?" Hey, if I could sit on the brim of my hat, I don't think I'd mind terrible much. It'd be a pretty spiffy place to find. Anyway, here we are. "Oh, put me in the brim of your hat," he said, "and there I can walk about and view the country and be in no danger of falling off." So they did as his wish, and when Tom Thumb had his leave of his father, they all set off together. And there they traveled on until dusk grew, and the little fellow asked to be set down a while for a change, and after some difficulty they did finally consent. So the man took him down from his hat and set him in the field by the roadside, and he ran away directly, after creeping about among the furrows, and slipped silently into a mouse hole, just what he was looking for. "Good evening, my masters, you can go home without me," he cried, laughing to them. and they ran up and felt about with their sticks right into the mouse hole, but in vain. Tom Thumb crept further and further in, and as it was growing dark, they had to make the best of their way home, full of vexation with their empty purses. When Tom Thumb found that they were gone, he crept out of his hiding place underground. "It is dangerous work groping about these holes in the darkness," he said. "I might easily break my neck." But good fortune came upon him, and he found an empty snail shell. "That's all right," he said. "Now I can get safely through the night," and he settled himself down into it. Before he had time to get to sleep, he heard two men pass by, and one was saying to the other, "How can we manage to get a hold of that rich parson's gold and silver?" Well, these were clearly two different men. "But I can tell you," cried Tom Thumb. "How's this?" said one of the thieves, quite frightened. "I heard someone speak." They stood still and listened, and Tom Thumb spoke again. "Take me with you, and I will show you how to do it." "Where are you, then?" they asked. And looking about on the ground, they will just kind of, So, "Look about on the ground," Tom says. And as they found him, they lifted up. "You little elf," they said, "how can you help us?" "Look here," answered he, "I can easily creep between the iron bars of the parson's room and hand you out whatever you would like to have." "Very well," they said. "We'll see what you can do." And when they came to the parsonage house, Tom Thumb climbed up into the room, but cried out with all of his might, "Will you have all that's here?" So the thieves were terrified and said, "Do speak more softly, lest anybody should be woken." But Tom Thumb made as if not to hear him, and he cried out again, "What would you like? All that's here?" So that the cook, who was sleeping in the room hard, had heard it, and raised herself and listened. The thieves, however, in their fear of being discovered, had run back part of the way, but they took courage again, thinking that it was only a jest of the little fellow. So they came back and whispered to him to be serious and go ahead and hand them out something. Then Tom Thumb called out once more, as loud as he could, "Oh yes, I'll give it all to you, if you only put out your hands." Then, listening, a maid heard him distinctly that time, and jumped out of bed and burst the door open, and the thieves ran off as if the wild huntsmen were behind them. But the maid, as she could see nothing, went to fetch a light, and when she came back with one, Tom Thumb had taken himself off without being seen by her into the barn, and the maid, when she had looked in every hole and corner, found nothing. So she thought she must have been dreaming with her eyes and ears open. So Tom Thumb crept along the hay and found a comfortable nook to sleep in, where he intended to remain until it was day, and then go home to his father and mother. But other things were to befall him. Indeed, there is nothing but trouble and worry in this world. The maid got up at dawn to feed the cows, and the first place she went to was the barn, where she took up an armful of hay, and as it happened to be the very same heap from which Tom Thumb lay asleep. And he was so fast asleep that he was aware of nothing, and never waked until he was in the mouth of the cow who had taken him up with the hay. "Oh dear," he cried, "how is this that I've gotten into a mill?" But as soon as he found out where he was, he had to be very careful not to get between the cow's teeth, and at last he had to descend into the cow's stomach. "The windows were forgotten when this little room was built," he said, "and the sunshine cannot get in. There's no light to be had." His quarters were in every way unpleasant to him, and what was the worst was new hay was constantly coming in, and the space was being filled up. At last he cried out in his extremity as loud as he could, "No more hay for me! No more hay for me!" The maid was then milking the cow, and as she heard a voice but could see no one, and as it was the same voice she had heard in the night, she was so frightened that she fell off her stool, spilled the milk, and ran in her great haste to her master, crying, "Oh dear master, the cow spoke!" "You must be crazy," answered her master, and went himself to the cow-house to see what was the matter. No sooner had he put his foot inside the door than Tom Thumb cried out again, "No more hay for me! No more hay for me!" And then the parson himself was frightened, supposing that a bad spirit had entered into the cow, and he ordered her to be put to death. So she was killed but the stomach where Tom Thumb was lying was thrown upon a dunghill. Tom Thumb had great trouble working his way out of it, and he had just made space big enough for his head to get through, when a new misfortune happened. A great hungry wolf ran up and swallowed the whole stomach in one gulp. But Tom Thumb did not lose courage. Perhaps he thought the wolf will listen to reason. And he cried out from inside the wolf, "My dear wolf, I can tell you where to get a splendid meal." "Where is it to be had?" asked the wolf. "In such house, and if you must creep through it and through the drain, and there you will find cakes and bacons and broths and as much as you could eat." And he described to him his father's house. The wolf indeed needn't be told twice. And he squeezed himself through the drain at night and feasted on the storeroom to his heart's content. When he was at last satisfied, he wanted to go away again, but the wolf had become so big that to creep out the same way back was impossible. Tom Thumb had reckoned upon this, and began to make a terrible den inside the wolf, calling and crying out as loud as he could. "Will you be quiet?" said the wolf. "You'll wake up the folks." "Look here," cried the little man, "if you are well and satisfied, and I now will do something for my own enjoyment." And he began again and again to make all the noise that he could. Well, at last the father and mother were awakened, and they ran to the room door and peeped through the little chink where they saw a wolf in occupation, and so ran to fetch weapons, a man the axe and a wife the scythe. "Stay behind," said the man as they entered the room. "When I have given him a blow, and it does not seem to have killed him, then you must cut at him with your scythe." Then Tom Thumb heard his father's voice and cried, "Dear father, I am here inside the wolf." Then the father, full of joy, cried out, "Thank heaven, we have found our dear child." But he told his wife to keep the scythe out of the way of Tom Thumb, lest he should be hurt with it. And then he drew near and struck the wolf such a blow on the head that he fell down dead, and fetched up the knife and a pair of scissors and slit up the wolf's body and let the little fellow out. "Oh, what anxiety we have felt about you," said the father. "Yes, father, I've seen a good deal of the world, and I'm very glad to breathe fresh air again." "And where have you been all this time?" asked his father. "Oh, I've been in a mouse hole and a snail's shell and a cow's stomach and a wolf's inside, and now I think I'll stay home." "And we will not part from you for all the kingdoms in the world," cried the parents, and they kissed and hugged their dear little Tom Thumb, and they gave him something to eat and drink and a new suit of clothes, as his old ones were sullied with travel. Yeah, all things considered, I would certainly be glad of fresh breath of air myself. Just breathing is nice. It's my favorite thing. So, have a good night.